Yeah, seriously, thanks to Rack 59. They've been providing us cookies and drinks and making that aspect of putting on these events really nice for, gosh, almost a couple years now or something like that. Also, Dennis with the Show Starts Now Studios. He's made it possible for us to televise these and upload some really good videos to our channel. Our sister chapter in Tulsa has really learned the value of Dennis, as they can't find someone as cool as Dennis to do that. And so, yes, thanks, Dennis, really. Insperity has provided the food for us tonight. I don't know if Josh made it in. He's probably afraid of the coronavirus. But the food did make it. And then Deep Fork Technology, of course, and our volunteers. And can all the volunteers that are cool stick a hand up?
You put the thing at the end.
What?
That are cool. Sorry.
Yeah, we're all cool.
The qualifier.
Yeah, anyway. So our values: make friends, not contacts. Give first, don't take. Help others before helping yourselves. And if you'd like to see that back on one of the boards like we used to have, it's like a $150 donation, and we could have our values board again. The roof leaked back there in the closet and destroyed it, and that was about a year ago. So if anybody's feeling passionate, that would help me not have to say that every time. So, how are we doing, Dennis?
We're good. We're live.
Cool. I'm going to introduce Chad. Chad is the founder of Accelerated Dealer Services, and kind of a big deal in a small piece of the world. So even though maybe you haven't heard of his company before, he's got a damn interesting story, and had a lot of fun over the last few months getting to know Chad and listening to bits and pieces of that story, and kind of wanted to bring that to you guys. So, yeah. So I have some awkward notes on the back. I've been really good at making things awkward, so forgive me, guys. It's just that way. So I think Chad's story started with this W-2 paycheck, and then what happened?
So thanks for having me. It's good to meet you guys. I don't know that I've met each of you yet, but we'll have some time. There's just so many folks in the audience that might take a moment to get through everybody. And I do have a quick news update for anybody that's watching on social media or on YouTube. And if you're not here because of the coronavirus, I totally understand that. But newsflash, we're all gonna die, including you, right? So, no, I appreciate the invite, Chris. So a little bit about me. I'm 33 years old. I'm from Bridge Creek, married to my beautiful bride, Laura. And we have 3 children. Bella is 7, Hattie is 5, and Baker just turned 2 on Friday. So we're in this really cool stage in life. And I actually met Chris through EO, right? Actually through Accelerator. So I've known Chris now for, it will be a year in May, right, Chris?
Yeah, I think so.
Time flies when you're having fun. So it's been really cool because I've kind of, to get into the story, I kind of lived under a rock for most of my entrepreneurial journey, right? Like with just blinders on, networking, meeting people, doing things like that. They seemed like totally unrelated to the goal and task in hand. So I avoided them. Like I used to say the plague, but now I can say the coronavirus, right? And I didn't realize until later on how foolish that really was, because Chris, you're a great dude, and it's being able to invest time with you and the other members of our network, our peer group EOA. It's actually, I don't know what value you or they've received from it, but I can assure you whatever that is, I've gained a lot more value just having that opportunity to be a coach, right? So when Chris asked me if I would be willing to do this, I would typically say, "Are you drunk?" Right? Or, "No, man, the coronavirus is out there." I'd come up with some lame excuse, but just I'm honored to do that, and just try to give back, so. I guess, I remember when I was 8 years old, my sister was, maybe I was 9, my sister was 3, and I've kind of always had like an entrepreneurial mindset, right? So I remember every Christmas time, I would climb these trees, right? And it's winter time, so they're dead. But there was something alive on them. It was mistletoe. You guys ever seen the mistletoe? Particularly in the winter time, right? So I'd climb up these trees, me and my cousins, and I kind of commandeered the whole thing, right? And we'd get these bags, and we'd fill up these huge trash bags full of mistletoe, right? And we'd drag them back home, and we'd bust them all out. And my mom taught us how to use sandwich bags, not the Ziploc. Those didn't really work that well. They needed to be the loose leaf sandwich bags, right? And she would teach my brother and sister and cousins and I how to take this mistletoe, how to break it up in a nice, really pretty arrangement, and how to tie a red ribbon around it, right? In a really janky Ziploc bag, and then you just have to take you have to take scissors and do this thing, and then it swirls up right? You guys familiar? And then I pimped out my 3-year-old sister, right? So my mom helped me with the packaging, right? And the Lord helped me with the manufacturing. There was no cost there, right? And my sister helped me do the selling, right? So she's 3 years old. She's knocking on doors in our neighborhood, literally, and I gave her the spiel. Hi, my name's Brandy. Merry Christmas. We're selling mistletoe. You can have 1 for $3 or 2 for $5. And I'm telling you guys, it was 100% close rate. If they opened the door, we closed them, right? So there's all kinds of little stories like that, Chris, that I could tell. But, just I guess maybe always had that mindset, tinkering and, kind of being creative and what if this would work, or what if this would work, or what if this would work. And so, I had various jobs growing up. My first job was at a golf course. I was a greenskeeper. I smoked a lot of pot on the greens then, and now that's not as frowned upon as it used to be. But then it was certainly frowned upon. My wife's giving me that look, right? Don't judge me. Anybody on YouTube, don't judge me. So I had a job as a greenskeeper, did construction work for my grandfather, flipped burgers at a gas station, right? My first real job was selling cars, 17 years old. So I didn't have, everybody went to college. That was a thing, right? But I didn't go to college because I didn't have the resources to go to college, right? And I thought, okay, well, I don't have the ability for anybody to pay for anything, right? So I can either go spend money with an education, or I could go make money right away, right? So that was kind of a no-brainer. My dad and my grandfather they would always sell cars, right? They were entrepreneurial, but they were automotive salespeople. So selling cars was their backup plan. That's what they were doing when the main plan didn't work, right? So I'd always kind of had the exposure to the automobile business. And so I thought, 17, I'm not going to go to college. That makes no sense, right? I'm not going to go to college and get a bunch of debt racked up, and I still don't even know what I want to do when I grow up, so I just want to go make some money. So that's what I started doing at 17, Fowler Dodge in Oklahoma City. And, I started selling cars. That was my first W-2 job. So that's the long way to answer your question, right? I guess technically it wasn't. I had other temporary W-2 jobs before then. So, and I just kind of fell in love with the auto industry. I started making a lot of money, and I had no bills, right? I was living at home with my dad and with my stepmom. I was dating my wife at the time, and I started making really good money, but I started making really bad decisions, right? And one thing led to another, and I started the company almost by accident, you could say,
By accident?
Yeah, so, I drank a lot, right? I wrecked a lot of cars, right? I did a lot of drugs, right? And I'm admitting this on whatever, it's the story, right? So I was that guy, right? I was that guy. And that has in the car business, that happens, right? Does anybody aware that there's this stereotype in the car business of a used car salesman, right? You guys ever heard of that stereotype?
No.
Oh man, see, I thought that was the most profound thing I was going to bring to today's meeting, so damn. So yeah, believe it or not, there's a stereotype in the industry, used car salesman, and he's a real cheesy guy, you know what I mean? And he's a greedy dude, and he's a mongrel, and he's gonna say and do anything it takes just to get your money. And he's definitely gonna trick you. You know what I mean? It's just to what extent. But you know, that's not really, that's like saying that all dentists just want to inflict pain on you, right? It's not true. You know, like a lot of these guys really care about your dental hygiene. You know what I mean? The same thing with attorneys, right? Not all attorneys are trying to shiest you. You know, that's debatable maybe. But so yeah, you know, I started selling cars, and I was that guy. It never intended, you know, with people. I always felt to do the right thing with my customers, right? Like I've always had that conviction point, right? But I didn't really treat myself right, I guess you could say. So yeah, I did life in the fast lane, right? Driving rented demos and making bad decisions, and I got a couple DUIs, and like I sold like 36 cars in 1 month. It was the most in the history of the store. And I just kind of thought I was invincible, right? Because I'm the guy that sells all the cars. So I do what I want. And there's this old saying in the car business, you can shit on the owner's desk if you sell enough cars, you know? So I guess they just got tired of the smell of my poop, you know? So I got fired one day, and I got fired, and I started wholesaling cars and boats and motorcycles and whatever, and I learned another important lesson. I was much better at selling things than I was at buying things, right? And that wasn't that big a deal when I worked at a dealership because I wasn't responsible for buying things. But when I was responsible for buying things is when I realized that you actually make your money when you buy, not when you sell. So I ran out of cash pretty quick, and I got a job offer to go to work for this company called Allegiant Marketing Group, and I was a sales representative. So that's kind of, you know, I did that for a little while, and you know, and then I just started realizing, like, I've always been entrepreneurial, right? I've always been a risk taker, and I saw a way to do what I was doing in a better way, and that's when I started. It was August of 2007. That's when I started ADS, and we've been in business, be 13 years in August. Yeah.
Excellent. So you started ADS, and you know, that was the dream. But how did that go?
Well, so I didn't really have a dream, right? I just had a goal, right? So this is the dream was simply to make $10,000 a month, right? I had this delusion that I think any decent entrepreneur, you kind of have to have this a little bit. And then I do think you also have to be clinically insane. Not a little bit, but a lot of it. But yeah, you know, so I had a goal that was like, all right, you know, I've made, you know, because it wasn't all far reaching, right? When I sold cars, you know, I could make $10,000 in a month routinely. And there's months I made a lot more than that, right? But I wasn't my own boss, right? And I had these entrepreneurial deals like selling mistletoe. I never made $10,000. I had all the freedom, but none of the money, right? And so all these different experiences that I had, I thought, well, if I could just make $10,000 a month and I can be my own boss, right? And then I'm not going to have any problems, right? And it's just going to be great because I'll have all the time in the world. So that was my goal, right? I didn't really have a vision, you know. It was more about not knowing it at the time. At the time, anybody would ask me, "What's your goal? What's your dream?" I'm going to make $10,000 a month. And to me, you know, at like 20 years old, that's a big dream. You know what I mean? And you know, I started, and it was rough. I mean, I remember. So that's the main thing. Like, you know, it's never easy, right? It's never easy. I started with this goal to make $10,000 a month, and there was a time that I was literally borrowing money from my father-in-law to pay my propane bill, right? It was like that. It was like all the stuff you read about, like the threats are imminent, failure's real, like what in the world, right? It was totally like that, you know. And that lasted some time, and I didn't realize at the time, you know. Think about it. You guys remember the recession, right? When was the recession? 2008, right? What industry was affected, you could argue, the most with the recession, right? The automotive industry, right? So like, Chrysler's getting bailed out, GM's getting bailed out. Like, there's still people that talk about it all these years later. They're loyal to Ford because they didn't take any bailout money. I'm like, dude, you should be worried about the coronavirus, not like what Ford did or didn't do 10 years ago, right? So, I remember getting started, and I didn't know this at the time because when there's that old quote, how are you ever supposed to be old and wise if you're not first young and dumb, right? And I didn't realize just how young and just how dumb I truly was, right? Because most young people, they're the smartest people you ever meet in your life too, right? Like if you got teenagers, I don't have teenagers, but I've heard about them. Oh boy, we're waiting for that. Like, yeah, we want to wait as long as we can. But, so I just didn't know how dumb I really was, right? And so I got rolling and I've got this goal, right, to make $10,000 a month. And I'm going to like cold call, literally, that was my strategy, right? I had a legal pad, a pencil, and a cell phone number with unlimited minutes, right? And I'm like, dude, I'm just going to knock out these cold calls. Like, not cold calls like, hey, I'm going to go meet Brent and knock on his office and be like, hey, Brent, here's some donuts. I'm a local guy. No, like legitimately running a Bush League telecommunications operation on a cell phone and a legal pad, right? So that's what I did, right? Because it was like, I have to survive, right? I've got to eat, right? Like, I'm not going to ask my father-in-law to pay my propane bill one more month. I'm not going to do that. Well, here's how stupid young people are. Meanwhile, the entire world is going to hell in a handbasket, right? Like literally, dealerships are closing by the thousands, right? People are trying to figure out how they're going to pay their mortgage and their pension's gone. And like, it's all this chaos, you know what I mean? And I was just completely numb to those facts because I didn't have an option. Right? I couldn't use that as an excuse. So I would turbo call these dealerships in 2008, 2009, and it lasted a year. It was a train wreck for a year, right? Like every single month was the month that I likely was going to fail, like in perpetuity. Couldn't rebound, right? My own family would tell me, legitimately, hey dude, that deal's never gonna work. You need to go get a real job. Like, dude, I'm pretty sure your family's supposed to be those guys that lie to you enough to be like, hey, just stick in there, buddy. Even they weren't convinced, right? I'm calling these guys and like, I remember this one dealer in Indiana. I don't remember his name, but his name's literally on the front of the dealership. And I'm calling and he's like, this is whatever it was. Bob Johnson. It's like Johnson Chevy, right? I'm like, this dude's the receptionist. Like, what's up, He's like, hey, son. Are you stupid? No, sir. I'm trying to sell you direct mail, right? And like, I can sell you a lot of cars. I know the economy's really bad, and just like, he's like, listen, you dummy. I've been doing this 45 years. I just shut the door. They took my franchise away from me. I'm the only employee left. You're gonna fail. So everybody just kept telling me, you're gonna fail. You're gonna fail. You're gonna fail. And I guess that's just what motivated me, right? I was like, I'm just not going to fail. I'm just not going to fail. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm not going to borrow money from my father-in-law again, right, for propane. I know that I'm not going to do that. And I'm not going to use this economy bullshit as an excuse, right? Not going to do that. And I don't know what else I'm going to do other than those two things I refuse to do. So to me, it was just work. That's the only thing I could do. I could outwork it. That's the only thing I had control over, right? So I guess now, like looking back on those early years, that was probably the best thing that could have ever happened, right? Because it really demonstrated to me that you can literally outwork any problem. And I really believe that, right? You can't outwork stupid long term. That's one you can't outwork. But, I just believe that persistence is I think it's a lost art. And I think even in today's world, particularly with my generation gets a bad rap. I'm 33 years old, and we get a bad rap that we're all lazy and we're all just like soft and all this stuff. That's just not true, But I think it's probably true that we're not our fathers or our grandfathers either. Does that make sense? Like we're different. The world we have raised up in a different world, different experiences. We have different viewpoints. But I do think that ability to like really grind, right? And that old school thought of just like, put on your hard hat, bro, and just go for it. It's maybe a bit of a lost art, and I don't know that our company would go on to do what it went on to do, if it wasn't for the first year and just how desperate it was, because it instilled a principle around hard work that will never leave the organization no matter what occurs.
So at what point did the hiatus happen? And what
Oh
led
yeah.
up to
So
that?
okay. So let's get back to the goal, right? So this is the goal. So because that's yeah. I got to tell you this is crazy. Half you guys are going to be like, this guy's completely full of shit.
You said you were insane.
I am.
And have to be a little bit insane.
Well, so some of it is hereditary. I've learned.
Oh yeah.
And that's a thing. That's an actual thing. But my wife is here to testify that I think she'd be the first to tell you that I am actually clinically insane, right? So here's the deal. It started with a goal, right? $10,000 a month and be my own boss, and I'm going to have problem-free business, and I'm going to have all this time and all this freedom, and it's going to be great. It's going to be just fantastic. And so we grinded through the first year, and finally started gaining some traction, right? And then 08 turned into 09, and then 9 turned into 10, and things just started getting better. Not just for me, but for the whole economy, for the automotive industry, for the automotive consumer, right? For the mortgage holder, blah, blah, blah. And so I started hitting my goal, Chris, right? So
right.
$10,000, and then immediately it was like, okay, 20 grand, right? And then 50 grand, right? Like I remember like as soon as one of those plateaus were hit, I would double it, right? And I would not stop to think about anything other than that's it. And I remember I had a goal of I'm going to make 100 grand a month. And that was like, what? Impossible, dude, right? Like I grew up in a trailer house, right? Like Dad and Grandpa were really successful, and then there were moments where they were really unsuccessful. So there were both of those, right? And I'm like, 100 grand a month? I remember, a matter of fact, I remember, well, I ramble a little bit, so I'll tell you. So yeah, I doubled it in 100 grand a month, and then I started hitting that goal. And then I realized I had a bigger problem, right? Like I realized that, I don't know, all this weird stuff happened all at once. And what was once my dream, right? It was like I woke up one day, I'm 26, 27 years old, right? And I've got an 18-month-old daughter, right? I've got another girl in the oven, gonna pop any minute, right? We just had the best year ever. We did $14 million in sales and $1.7 million in net profits, and I'm like, right, I'm just like, the saying, like, living your best life. That's me, right? And so, and then I was so miserable. Like, I was depressed, right? Like, my dream had turned into my nightmare. And it happened that fast. You know what I mean? Before I even knew what happened. And it was wild, and I tried to fight it, and I tried to fight it, and I tried to fight it, and I did everything I knew how to do to just right the wrongs and steer the ship. And I didn't. I failed. I failed. I did. So I remember I told my wife, right? She was like, what do you want to do? I said, well, I'll tell you what I want to do. I want to buy a motorhome, and I want to spend 2 years on the road. She was like, what do you really want to do? I was like, I want to shut this business down. I want to buy a motorhome, a nice one, that we can fit our daughters in, right? And I want to I just want to get away. And like, who would do that? Like, what kind of person? What kind of logical person would even conjure that idea, first of all? But what a special human being to say, you know what, that's the craziest. So I told you I might be clinically insane. Here's some proof. She was like, okay. Right? She's like, let's do it. And we did it. And it was cool, man. It was the best. It was the best time in my life. I mean, I don't know. We got a lot to still write in our journey of life, right? In our book of life. Whether that's, ADS, my organization, or whether that's me personally, or whether that's my relationship with my wife or our children. So we got a whole lot left unwritten in this book, right? or at least that's what we hope, because tomorrow's not a given, right? But that will likely be the I don't know that I'll ever. I've told my wife this, actually. I don't know that we're ever going to have that time back again. You know what I mean? It was special. It was really cool.
So you're in a motorhome. You were making bank. We can call that bank, right? I think 6 figures a month sounds like, we'll just call that bank.
Oh, okay, so sorry. So I'll go to, this is a funny story, and I was like, what? This is really true? So we go to Mathis Brothers, right? We just built our home. And this was before all that, before the big fall. This is when I thought I had all my shit together. I'm the smartest guy in the world. And nanny boo-boo, I can make 6 figures a month. That was kind of my mentality, to be honest, right? It was my mentality around my employees, around customers, I was an asshole. And I never meant to be. It's just, I was a slave. I was a slave to the money. Does that make sense? And anyway, we're in Mathis Brothers, and we're like getting all this furniture, right? And I'm sitting here thinking, do I pay cash or do I finance, right? And this sweet lady, you know, she's putting the sales pitch on me, and she's like, you should really finance, you know what I mean? And I'm like, I don't know, babe, what do you think? She's like, why not? You get a 10% discount and it's 0% interest. I'm like, all right, whatever. So I give her my credit information, and she says, what's your monthly income? And I said, $120,000. She said, no, what's your monthly income? I said, $120,000. And she looked at me like I was a ghost, you know what I mean? And, you know, then I was like, ha, 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 right? Like Tim the Toolman Taylor. I was that dude, you know what I mean? I was like, that's right, baby, you know? And now I'm like, what a dumbass, you know? Like, who cares about that? You know what I mean? I should have just told that sweet lady that, you know, I pay myself it didn't matter, right? But I just kind of, I got caught up in that, Chris, I guess, and so, yeah, it is, man. And it was so shallow, was what I didn't realize until I was there, just how empty it really was. And so yeah, the time, you know, the way I look at my story is like, it's kind of like the beginning, you know, and then it was the go, right? And then it was the achievement, and then it was the failure. You know what I mean?
So you put the company together. The goal was make money. Hella successful at that piece.
Not terrible.
And there was some pieces you were unsatisfied enough with to say, fuck it, I'm firing everybody and I'm going to get in a motorhome for a couple of years.
Yeah.
So that's not insignificant. And then you're hanging out in this motorhome for a couple of years, probably reflecting and thinking about stuff, because and we know you had to be reflecting because eventually you started it again.
Yeah, so when I left, when we did that, I really didn't have any intention of like having another real job again ever for the rest of my life, right? Like, I didn't know how I was going to make that work, because I knew that's not like realistic, you know what I mean? But I was so burnt out, I was just like, dude, I'm never talking to another human being ever, other than my wife and family, you know what I mean? But when we traveled, you know, I would go visit clients, right? Or I would go do projects and stuff like that, because I'm ADHD, and if I don't have 700 plates spinning at once, then I get to be a real weird version of myself. I think my wife could tell you more about that, but so I kind of always kept that going, but like I never had any intention. Like, I was overwhelmed. It was too much. I couldn't handle it. And like, I literally was like borderline suicidal, right? And I was just like, dude, this is not that important, Chad. Like, get over yourself, right? Like, so the only way that I could really do that maybe was to go that extreme, you know, and to spend that time traveling. So yeah, I spent all this time, couple years, and it wasn't like we were full-timers. I begged my wife, let's just sell our house and be full-timers, and she refused. She was like, not happening. So we never got to do that. But I think one time we counted it up, and we spent like, in those 2 years, I think we spent like 44 weeks or something like that on the road. Maybe a little more, maybe a little less. I mean, we were booking it. We spent enough time on the road to put 48,000 miles on a diesel pusher in 2 years. So think about that. You know what I mean? I mean, we were going. And it was awesome. And I didn't have any intention to do it again.
Like, so what changed?
I don't know, man. Like, here's the deal. I spent a lot of time reflecting on where I really messed it up, right? And I don't know that it was as much I spent conscious time thinking about it as it was unconscious time. But I'll never forget a day that we were in the San Antonio KOA, which we're going there next week for spring breaks, one of our all-time favorite places. There's a KOA not far from the AT&T Event Center where the Spurs play. And I'll never forget, I'm sitting outside one just super nice spring morning. And it's just like, I just had this feeling, right? Like I heard, it was like, you know how sometimes people say that they hear from God? I had never really like heard somebody be like, Chad, take out the dishes. You know what I mean? I've never heard that, ever. And it wasn't like that either, right? I was just in my journal and we were just doing life and things were cool and it was slow and it was just the way we wanted it. And we were investing time with each other and with our children and with experiences. And it was just awesome. And then I remember writing in the journal, like I couldn't write the words fast enough. And I couldn't think about anything other than getting these words in my journal, right? And these words were like, it was crazy because it was saying like, I created you to build things, right? And I was like, what does that mean? Why am I like, what in the hell, right? And I just kept thinking about it. And I sat there for like a half hour. And I'll never forget, I came into the motorhome and I was like, hey, Laura, we need to talk. She was like, okay. I was like, so like this whole thing's been great. But there's this part. So what I realized, Chris, is that there is a part of me, with as much fun as we were having in those 2 years and all that, there was this part of me that was super discontent, even with that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
There was a void that I had that was like I traded one void, but kind of for another one. You know what I mean? And so it was just really kind of, I guess you could say, spiritual thing, right? It was just like some real clairvoyance and like, and then I knew right then, like I knew right then that I was going to do it over again, And
But how did you know it wasn't going to be a dream turned nightmare again?
Well, so like, here's the thing, man. I still don't know, right? Like, here's the thing. And I think most people in this room can tell you, right? The people that own businesses, right? Like this idea that, the numbers are the numbers, right? How many businesses fail? You guys know the numbers. I don't need to repeat the numbers. I hate hearing that stuff, right? It's like, neg me out. If I wanted to be negged out, I just watch the news. You know what I mean? But it's true, right? Most businesses fail. So for you to say, well, how do you know that it's not, your dream's not going to turn into your nightmare again? Well, the real answer is, I don't, right? And like, I think there's a lot of people who have this idea that I'm going to start a business, right? And I'm going to make money and I'm going to have freedom and I'm going to have no problems and I'm going to be, it's just not true. Like, it's false. Like, quit lying to yourself, right? Like, it's just never that way, right? It's always good. When you start a business, what you're saying is, I'm going to inherently understand that the threat is real, it's imminent, and it's omnipresent, first of all, right? And I'm going to do everything within my power to move forward despite all those, right? So we have this idea that we're going to have more time, more money, less problems. And in my experience, Chris, you get the opposite of what you want virtually in every one of those areas in perpetuity, right? That's just the truth.
It's been my experience.
But I think you can take the right perspective about that, right? I think that's what's changed, right? So today, so I'm an EO, right? And there's a certain threshold of revenue. Now, our organization's not nearly as big as it once was, but that's not the goal anymore, right? That's just not the goal. It's the goal eventually, right? But it's just not the goal today. So, we do a decent amount of revenue, I think, by lots of measures, but compared to what we used to do, it's a minuscule amount of revenue. It's less than half of what our peak was. But I think the difference is it's the reason why we're doing it, right? Like, I've never, in the last 12 months, there's been 5 months I've lost money, right? Like, I've literally, the business lost money, period. And I'd come home to my wife, and she'd be like, what's wrong with you? And I'd be like, I don't want to talk about it. Right? Whereas like 10 years ago, I would literally come home and cry myself to sleep with her in the bed. Right? So it's like, well, you're growing, right? I think that's what entrepreneurialism offers, is an opportunity to grow more as a human being than you could ever imagine growing in a simulator. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But you can't be delusional about it, right? Because a lot of people say, oh, well, when I hit this plateau, I did this, right? 10,000, 20,000, 50,000, 100,000, right? One of these days, I'm gonna, right? That was what I told myself. It was a lie. I was straight lying to myself. I always thought, well, when I reach a certain level of revenue or profits or cash or whatever, then all of a sudden the problems are gonna magically dissipate. Not true. Matter of fact, the truth is, the bigger level, the bigger the problem. So your goal, right? If you own a business, right? And it doesn't matter to me if your business does $10,000 a year or $100 million a year. Doesn't matter. It's my opinion, right? You should never expect to have a problem-free business. That's just not even a realistic expectation. How you know you're winning is when the quality of your problems is constantly going up. If you're ever evaluating the success of your business, the hell with your financial statement, which, by the way, that's a fairly important measure too. Not gonna lie, okay? But if you're seeing the same problems, if they're lateral or you're going backwards, and it's not just like week over week or month over month, but year over year, if you can't answer a serious question, are the quality of my problems going up or down? That's it, right? And if you can't give yourself an honest evaluation of that question, then you know what, man? Maybe owning a business isn't for you, right? It's not. I just don't know, this idea of like, well, I'll start it. So a business is like a relationship, right? It really is if you think about it. Relationships are so easy to start, right? They're easy. Any schmuck can start a relationship, right? Because it's fun and it's exciting, right? And I get to meet you and I get to know a little bit about you and we get to know about each other. It's cool, you know what I mean? And not just romantic relationships, but any type of relationship, right? Like, hell, I remember the first time I met you, right? I was like, yeah, this is awesome. New person, new story, new problems, new solutions. So I think a business is like a relationship, right? Any schmuck can start them, man. That's the easy part, the honeymoon phase, right? But man, like growing them is hard. It's just hard. It's never easy. To assume it's gonna be easy, it's my opinion. I made that mistake a long time, right? Years of it, man. Sometimes I think I wasted a decade of my life, to be honest with you. Now, clearly I didn't waste it, because in life you either learn or you earn, right? But I still spend time reflecting on that 10 years all the time. I preach towards it. I coach towards it. I tell my team about it, right? I think about how I can tell my children about these things. Because the more I learn is not lessons I've learned about running a business. It doesn't have anything to do with that. Although that's helpful. It's, I think, lessons I've learned about like life. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? It's hard, man. It's always hard. It's uphill the entire way. There's no reprieve, right? There's no safety, right? There's none of that. That's all delusional, right? Now you can exit, right? Yeah, for sure. You can hire people to run your business. So I'm not saying that it's just this big drudgery thing. I love it. I couldn't imagine doing anything other than this, right? I think it's what I'm made to do. But I think it takes a certain type of mindset. You know what I mean? I really do. I think it takes a certain type of mindset to be able to sign up for all that brain damage and stay. That's okay. I'm going to do it anyway. All
right, so I'm going to go with your analogy about it. Being an entrepreneur is sort of like being in a relationship, and I kind of think, man, if I could go back to 10 years ago and give myself some advice about how to be married and not be a fuck up, I could give some pretty good advice and might have like advanced my skill level,
For sure.
Rather than like this, So if you could roll back to 2009 and give Chad some advice, what would you tell him?
So that's a great question, man. And I would, we would run out of time. We'd run out of time for me to tell him everything I wanted to tell him. But I think the most important thing I learned, right? The very most, and it's hard for me to say which of these is most important because I'm still deciphering all those facts, you know what I mean? But, I think the most important thing I've learned is that if what you're doing, if there's not something that means more than some objective financial goal, right? If you're chasing the money, then just be honest with yourself. Hey man, I'm chasing the money. There's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't make you a bad person. But don't confuse that with chasing meaning or purpose in your life, right? So I was running away from things from my past, from the 10 previous years, thinking that money was going to bring me this thing that I really wanted. Does that make sense? So that's what I would tell myself 10 years ago. If it worked like that, you know what I mean? Like if I had the Wayback Time machine, I would say, hey man, this money is pretty shallow, and yeah, you needed some of it and all that's cool, but think about what's the real meaning behind what you're trying to do and why, So I think that would be a huge one. Another one that I would say is that, there's a saying, I can't remember who authored it, but it's one of my all-time favorite quotes. It says that if you want to go fast, go alone, right? But if you want to go far, you go with a team, right? And that would be the absolute, I maybe even put that as number one, Chris. You got to bring people along with you, man. You know what I mean? And you got to, it may be hard to, I think about how many people I lost. And in 10 more years, so we did $130 million in revenue in 13 years. Not bad from a dude that's barely high school educated. You know what I mean? Trust me.
For anybody.
Not bad, and I overcame.
And you spent 2 years in a motorhome.
That includes 2 years in the motorhome. There wasn't much revenue in those years. That's true. I think about that, and I'll probably think about that 10 years from now. And I'll probably think about that 10 years from then. Is not how much I did, but I think about how many people I lost along the way that had nothing to do with them. Like what I wouldn't give to have some of those people by my side today. Because all they wanted to be was by my side, right? So I think that's a thing. That's a definite thing. You got to begin with the end in mind, right? So that's a very important step. It's kind of likened to the first two, but it's different. Now I know, right? Now I know what the end looks like. So in those moments, you know what I mean? Whether it's a high or whether it's a low or whether it's a season of life or whether it's a bad deal or whatever, I can always check that fact. What's the end look like? And then if I put myself in that spot, does this really matter? And sometimes the answer is yes, but you'd be surprised how many times the answer is no. You know what I mean? So that would be a really important one. And then you hear a lot of people talk about like core values, right? I didn't know what core values were. Like I had no idea what core values were. I was like, hey, my core value is money, and it worked, right? But it didn't, if that makes any sense at all. So I think you got to have rules, man, because you think about it. If you have a vision, right, and you start with the end in mind, right, and you really have a desire to chase meaning over money, and you want to take people with you along that journey, right, they're going to have shrapnel all over the place, just like you are. It's part of the journey of life, right? So if you don't have some house rules, right, that everybody can agree, these are the rules that we're going to run this house from, period. When everything else goes to hell in a handbasket, right? And everybody's tripping out because of the coronavirus. What are we going to do? And those little things, right? Little bitty things. I never spent any time thinking about that. I was the guy that's like, yeah, y'all think about all that bullshit. I'm going to go sell something. I was that guy, right?
Mission statements are bullshit for the wall.
Yeah, for sure, man. I was like, whatever. Mission statements are for people that can't do this. Hold my beer. And I was arrogant like that, right? But man, you got to have it, because people need it, Chris, right?
But you and I agree about values. Like, man, a good set of values are like to live and die by in a company.
Absolutely.
But why? Like,
Well,
what's the sales pitch for?
It's no sales pitch, right? It's like dude, you're going to send these people. I mean, think about what I just shared with you, right? And the next 10 years are going to be very much of the same, right? They are. So what am I going to do? We'll put these guys out in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean when a damn tropical storm comes and give them no lifesavers? Like, I'll do that to myself because that's my job, right? As the owner, as the founder, it's my vision, it's my baby, right? That's my job. To do the things that others won't, right? But to intentionally put other human beings in that harm when it's not theirs, they didn't give birth to it. And you know what? When the end is here and we've exited, they get nothing by design. That's just not right. It makes no sense. So the reason why, it's not a sales pitch, right? It's just the truth. You got to give these people things that they can sink their teeth into that have nothing to do with circumstances, right? Hey, circumstances will come, easy go. Highs and lows and ebbs and flows, and that's cool. But no matter what, whether we're real high or real low, these are the anchors, right? These are your lifesavers, right? So when the tropical storm comes, right? Forget the storm, dude. Grab a hold of your lifesaver and know that everybody on the team is doing the exact same thing. And you can doubt everything you want, but you cannot doubt those things. Right?
Yeah.
So that's the value of them, right? That's the value of them.
So one of the things that I think is interesting in one of our conversations was the concept of Big Belt Buckle Bob. And I don't think I've heard anybody else explain the concept of knowing your customer in an avatar type format. But would you mind introducing to these guys Big Belt Buckle Bob and why he makes it, why he matters? I mean, you're one of the things that you are awesome at is being able to sell shit to people. And as an entrepreneur, man, if you can't sell, like, you get kind of stuck. And I mean, just talking to my peers, I think a lot of us have trouble. A lot of us have a great idea and a great thing, and have a lousy way of being able to pitch it and introduce it to people. But understanding the customer is such an important piece that I feel like a lot of us never quite figure that out. And the way you explained Big Belt Buckle Bob one day was like, man, that's almost golden. You could have like a little one-page book about how to know your customer.
So we have 7 profiles, right? And so Big Belt Buckle Bob is one. And so we market to consumers. So it's B2C, right? On behalf of our clients, right? So we're actually B2B. We'll go find a franchise auto dealership that wants to sell more cars, right? And then once we close him, right, then we'll go into his market, right, and we'll use Facebook and Google ads and targeted, database targeting methods and some telecommunications things, right? And we'll start marketing that dealership's store and inventory and brand to those consumers, right? So that's kind of how our business works, right? So we realized, like, through the years, this wasn't just like one day, wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and just start saying, oh, there's the 7 profiles. It didn't really work like that. It's been more iterative in nature. But Big Belt Buckle Bob is one of the 7 personas, right? That we've identified. And here's the thing: everybody knows a Big Belt Buckle Bob, right? We all know him. He's real rash, right, dude? He's politically incorrect AF, right? That's an acronym. It makes it a little bit more like political. So Big Belt Buckle Bob's just a lot, man. He's got that big F-150, 250, 350, and if they come out with one that's bigger, guess what? He's got that one the next day, right? And he's got that big belt buckle on, right? And that big 10-gallon cap. And by golly, I know it all, Sonny. I need your best price right now. You know what I mean? He's just real rough with people, and he's kind of an ego guy, right? That's So we don't make these things to poke fun of them, right? Although the humor is humorous, which makes it interesting. We make these to understand our humans better, right? But as we understand our consumers better, it's the craziest thing that happens in the process. We understand ourselves better, right? Because we've all got a little bit of some of these people within us. So Big Belt Buckle Bob's my personal favorite. Just because, now here's the thing. We have a Big Belt Buckle Bob in our organization today. Not that works in our organization. He's a client of our organization. And just today before I came here, I was talking to my COO about our Big Belt Buckle Bob that's a client, right? And this person is rough with people, right? And they don't mean well. So here's the often misunderstood thing about Big Belt Buckle Bob. Beneath all that armor and front he puts on, right? He is I will come paint your fence, right? I will every Sunday drive your children to Sunday school, right? Like Big Belt Buckle Bob is one of the best human beings you can ever meet, right? But he puts up such a front that it takes a really strong A personality to put his ass in check. And it doesn't matter who else you introduce him to. If they're not a stronger A than him, he's gonna be the alpha male, right? So there's a Big Belt Buckle Bob that we're talking through today. And I told my COO, I was like, listen, let's just understand Big Belt Buckle Bob, right? Because this customer is dealing with on one of our team members, and this lady's a stud, Chris. She could be a complete star. She's got everything it takes. But, she's new, right? She's been with us 5 months, right? And we have this Big Belt Buckle Bob, man, that's like really big personality and very knowledgeable, right? Technically maybe knows more than our new employee about some of the digital marketing things and whatever. Now, most Big Belt Buckle Bobs, they think they know a lot more than they actually do. And this Big Belt Buckle Bob's no different, right? So we were talking about that and as a means to, that's how you develop relationships, right? You have to understand where people are coming from, right? You don't have to agree with them, right? But you have to understand. And part of our organization, we're a sales organization, right? So if we're going to sell on behalf of our clients, which is what we tell them we're going to do, then it's our duty to understand that as well as anybody else on planet Earth, right? So that's kind of the story behind Big Belt Buckle Bob.
Well, we're running almost to the end of time, so probably ought to flip over to questions.
I have a question from someone online.
Oh, cool.
The person asked, what is the best place to go for people who want to invest in Oklahoma City businesses?
Oh, wow. So do you remember that comment I made like maybe an hour ago that I was like a schlep rock for the first 10 years and I was socially awkward and I didn't leave Newcastle, Oklahoma? You guys remember that? So I don't know, man. I mean, I should know that. Don't know that. You know that?
Here? I don't know.
What are they looking for, Dennis? Money?
Just if someone wants to support, for people who want to invest in Oklahoma City businesses, what should they do?
So this might seem like a really obvious question, but that's what banks are in business for. So they might not, not intended to sound wise. I don't know if this person's thought about that, but some local banks are wanting to invest in local communities. So I'm not talking about go to Chase Bank. I'm talking about, go to First National Bank or go to Commerce Bank or M&T Bank. Go to a bank that's local in your community because they care about your community, right? I know that there's investment groups, there's some incubators and accelerators and things of that nature, but I just don't know much about people looking to invest in businesses. I don't know much about that.
Yeah, whoever that person is, if you want to set up an appointment with Bob, we can connect you with people in Oklahoma City.
Question for you, Chad. You talked about the value statements that you guys hold true and due to. What does that look like for your employees? Because you mentioned every company is now, of course, part of the process. You have to have your mission statement, your value core values, whatever, they go up on the wall, and if you're not careful, that's the last time you see them, or that you don't oftentimes see them lived out on a day-to-day. What does that look like for you guys, having kind of been through this process of kind of coming back to that and figuring out what you really want to see happen in your business? How does that work out for you guys on a day-to-day basis?
You want to repeat the question? You want me to?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so the question from Brent, thank you for that, Brent, is it's relative to core values, right? So how do you make sure that core values and principles, because we have both, right? We have core values and we have 12 principles, and that's just too many to say these are all most important. You know what I mean? So we have to do much better in that area, Brent. But like, I don't know that we can ever do too good of a job of keeping those front and center, right? But what we try to do is create measurables, right, where we can see and we can gain some insight as to, because what we realize is a lot of the problems recur quite frequently, right? And if there's one of these 12 values or principles that was not being implemented, then that exception rate or that project time or that deadline or that pissed off customer or that training call, something is amiss. You know what I mean? But I know a guy who's gotten way further into putting measurables behind every single value system he has. We're not quite to that level, right? So we every time we have a problem, every time, right? We preach on those core values, right? What are the core values? What's the principle? What's the principle? We have some measurement systems that can kind of tell us if it's happening or not, but that's one of the bigger things that we can improve on this year is tying those directly to not just organizational measurables, but department level and even individual team members measurables.
Thanks. Chuck, so thanks for speaking. So being someone that's passionate, as you say, insane, how would you, any advice you would say as it relates to being a crazy entrepreneur and your interactions with your family long term, making sure that your craziness does not negatively impact the family? Okay.
Yeah. What do you think about maybe Laura could answer that question,
Yeah.
right? You know, I think it's a great question, man, and I think your tribe's in it for the long ride, right? Like, that's the way I see it. You know what I mean? So let me answer your question by giving you one of our core principles, right? The deals that set up right close right. That's what we say, right? This whole notion of like the big print giveth and the fine print taketh away. That's the way it's always been, right? We try to flip that completely upside down, right? Like, that's our goal. Do we do it 100% of the time? Of course not, right? But it's very important. You get one time to set the deal up right the first time. If you do that, man, people get closer to you, right? If you miss that step, then they get reluctant, particularly when problems happen. Then they're like, oh, I knew that, right? I knew that sounded too good to be true, or whatever, right? So the principle that I think would apply there is the deals that set up right close right. Now, I'm not proud to admit this. I'm really not. But because there's my family, meaning my wife and my 3 children. And then there's my family, meaning family that's not named them. And not to ramble, but my family that's not named them, that probably wouldn't give you much value in terms of the answer to that question, right? And I'd be happy to talk to you about why that is, separately. But my family, meaning my wife and my children, right? I remember, and it's kind of, maybe I shouldn't even say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. I remember the day that I told, at the time, my girlfriend, which is Laura, right? We were in business maybe 6 months, maybe 9 months, something. And I was like, I just get crazy like this, right? The passionate guy, over the top, right? And I don't know what, and it's probably something that I regret saying the most. Maybe not the single thing, because I've said a lot of stupid shit, but I said, hey, just so we're clear, here's the pecking order. And I said, number 1 is this business. Number 2 is you. If you have a problem with that, let me know right now. Right? And I was like, that was stupid to say. You know what I mean? And I meant it, but I didn't really mean it. Does that make sense? So I think it's about just establishing the ground rules. Don't say that, man. That's stupid. You know what I mean? That's really stupid. Because the reality is there's like the business now is like so much less important. You know what I mean? To then it meant something to me. It was irrational what it meant.
She gave you a mulligan on that.
She's given me a lot of mulligans, man. Like I told you, it's the same woman that I was like, yeah, I'm like, if this is being successful, then like the hell with success. I want to be unsuccessful. Let's go hit the road. And she's like, all right, cool. I'll pack. You know what I mean? Like who does that? I don't know. Normal people don't. So she's got a little crazy in her too. Don't let her fool you otherwise. But yeah, I think it boils down, with family, right? I think it boils down to, setting the right ground rules, right? But that door swings both ways, man, right? So you can't. There's a saying that wherever your heart is, so too your treasure shall be, right? So I've met a lot of people, particularly in the car business, right? It's got that persona about it, that stereotype, right? I've met a lot of men in this car business that say the number one and number two most important thing to them were their wife and their children. And that's what they'd say. And I'd say, me too. Cool. We have some common ground. And then I would turn off what they say and I would just watch them behave. And what they said, not with words, but with acts, was actually, money's more important to me. Status is more important to me. Going out with the boys is more important than me. Right? And all these other things that are completely opposite. So I would just encourage you or anybody else, right? Just be mindful. I mean, we're humans. Nobody's going to be perfect, right? Like, do not shoot for perfection. It's a trap. It doesn't exist. Perfection is like happiness. You want to know what they have in common? Yeah. They're a state of mind. Nothing more, nothing less, right? So don't shoot for something that's completely a state of mind. So don't try to be perfect. That's another one of our core values, right? It's progress over perfection. But I would challenge you or anybody else who is concerned about that. My natural tendency is to give this company 100% of what I have and just forget about the fact that there's all these other things that are so much more important to me than that. It's just not like my nature's such, right? But over time and through reps, I'm giving you this super ass long answer because I think this is a super ass important question, by the way, right? Like you just got to kind of check yourself, maybe even ask your loved ones, right? Just genuinely. Like I know, I ask my wife these days. For the first 10 years, I never asked once, right? But I'll ask her, because I want to know the real answer, right? I don't want to just whatever she's going to say to make me feel good. I want to know how she feels, right? Like, hey, I know I'm probably spending more time because that's my job, right? As a dad and as a provider and as a this. But I just want to know. Like, I know I can get better, but am I out of balance here? Right? And she tells me, man. And sometimes she's like, no, dude, get out of your head. Like you're the dad, dude. You're trying to grow the business. I get it. We get it. You're here every night. You're this, you're that. But other times, I don't like the answer she gives me quite as much, right? And when those times come, then that's my time to say, all right, how do I create a little bit more balance? You know what I mean?
I think we got time for like one more. Or, like I said, we're all done. Seriously, are there any more questions? Well, cool. Well, thank you, Chad.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. Thanks a lot. Thank you, guys.
Definitely appreciate your time, and we have the room for another 20 or 30 minutes or something like that.